All right, good morning. Oops, get rid of that. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Monday. Is it week 8 already? This is week 8. It's all just, you're just in a haze of time and space. It's hard to keep track. I think it's week 8 though, which is shocking. I hope everyone had a good weekend. Yeah, good weekend? No? Why not?
Midterms.
Oh, midterms. Are they over now at least, or? Oh, what, almost? They're not over? They're never over?
Other than midterms.
Unfortunately, we're coming to the part of the term where, yeah, the work will start to increase until the end. But that's okay, we're close. What is it? It's March 1st. Last day of class is April 10?
That's
Yeah, so we're 5 weeks. We're 5 weeks out. Maybe a little less than that, so insane, right? Goes so fast. Okay, so on Friday, we were talking about China. We spent a little time kind of getting to know Confucius and the time that he lived. I asked you to read this section of the textbook and answer these questions, and we did, right? The textbook was nice enough to provide us with a few quotes from our good friend Confucius, and yeah, and he said lots of things, but the statements in the text here are, yeah, a noble person is concerned with rightness. A small person is concerned with profit, right? So, actually, it's funny. My girlfriend and I were talking about this on the weekend in terms of someone who works in sales. And the really good people who work in sales actually follow Confucius's idea. If you want to be a good either salesperson or account manager of some point, don't concern yourself with profit, concern yourself with rightness, or in this case, with the relationship. If you make good relationships with people, with your customers, and you treat them as people, the money will come. If you focus on the money, it won't work, because people don't like that. People don't like to be seen as just, a profit to be made. People like to be seen as people, right? They like to be interacted with people. So if you want to be a good sales, account manager, business person, it's really all about the relationship. You can't focus on the money too much. Good morning, Noah. Confucius knew that, or at least he was talking about something similar. I don't know if he was talking about business. Young men should be filial at home and respectful to their elders when away from home, right? So this idea that the family structure is important. The family is full of powers and rights and obligations and things that happen within the family, and those should extend out into greater society as well, right? If you have a person who respects their parents, they will respect other people in society, so says Mr. Confucius. The noble man does not abandon humaneness for so much as the space of a meal, right? And so you can't be, hey Nav, good morning. You can't be, if you want to be a good person, it's a full-time job, right? You don't be good sometimes and then, when you feel like it, you're a jerk, right? It's not how it works. The noble man does not abandon his humaneness ever, not even for the half an hour it takes to eat, right? It's the full-time kind of thing. Heaven has given birth to the virtue that is in me, right? So I guess he has some sort of, religious or supernatural ideas that he expresses here, and that kind of comes through him, right? So there's kind of an idea of, it's almost like, the Indian concept of Atman, or the soul, or whatever you want to call it, the spark, the light. Lots of people have different words for it. Here, Confucius is the virtue, but he recognizes that there's something in all of us that is not, that is, how do we describe it? something is not us, or something that actually is us, right? And that our physical body is just that, right? It's a physical body, but there's something, yeah, something maybe eternal, or something, yeah, there's some sort of soul, there's some sort of something magical in each one of us. And then he says here, yeah, to govern is to rectify. If you lead a people by being rectified yourself, who will dare not to be rectified, right? So if you live in a righteous way as a ruler, then you will serve as a role model for the people, and many people hopefully will live in a righteous way as well. Right? We certainly see that if you are not rectified yourself, Donald Trump, you will see that a lot of people will behave in an unrectified kind of way, right? Which again, I think we also saw in the United States. So the reverse is true. If you don't live in a sort of righteous, respectful way, it's pretty hard to expect your citizens to act that way as well. Or at least that's what Confucius was thinking. So we said that he, these teachings that he assembled and taught to his students, and his students continued to pass them on as well, had to do not so much with religion or souls or what happens when you die, but more about how to live in a society, right? He constructed rules of etiquette and social norms, and hoped that if everyone practiced these, then we would have a noble, just society, right? We talked a little bit about the Tao, right? And the Tao is mysterious. It is beyond the perception of your senses, but it is the source of all life in the universe. And how to describe it? It's indescribable, right? So, just kind of cheating, but how to describe it? Well, it's indescribable, right? It's some sort of force that permeates the universe. Again, it kind of sounds like the Star Wars force, if you will, which probably George Lucas borrowed from Taoists for his Star Wars thing. But we said the goal of Taoists and of humans is to be in alignment with the Tao, right? If you want to live a good life, you have to empty your mind, calm your spirit, relinquish attachments, and that will allow you to live in accordance with this mysterious, indescribable force, whatever that is, right? But that's just the base, right? And we said as Taoism goes on, it continues to be elaborated and developed, and people, there's people talking about how to live longer and maybe how to be immortal, how people can, it becomes, I guess, it kind of evolves from sort of a spiritual practice to something that looks more like a religion, I suppose we could say. So the base version of it is very simple, but more elaborations get made in kind of later centuries. What's next here? Oh, okay. So this is what I was going to ask you to read on Friday, but I took mercy on you because it was Friday. But now I shall not take mercy on you. I shall ask you to read these few pages, answer these few questions, because it will set up a film that I'm going to show you very shortly on the Qin Dynasty and the Qin Emperor. Okay, so but I would like you to just know a few of these things before we jump into the film, because the film won't explain. Well, it'll explain a little bit, but I'd like us to have a bit of a background first. So I'll give you some time to read this section of the text, answer the questions, and then we can go on to the film itself. Coolio? Okay, so let's do it. I'll put some time on the clock here, and then we'll talk about these questions. Okay, good people. So maybe not a ton to talk about in this section, but maybe a little bit. Um, Very quickly, how does this Qin Dynasty begin? Wait, let me ask you this before we start. What is a dynasty? Say that one more time. An era of a ruler? Right. And what how do we define that period? Yeah. Yeah, so it's kind of a line of hereditary kings, right? So the title of king or emperor passes from one guy to his son, to his son's son, to his son's son, son's son's son, all the way down until eventually that line is broken, right? So usually you get another powerful person who comes in, overthrows the king, kills them all, and takes control. And then you have the beginning, maybe, you have the beginning of a new dynasty, right? So here we have, prior to the Qin, who comes before the Qin? It's the Warring States, and before the Warring States, it's the Zhou, right? So the Zhou was a line of hereditary kings, father to son to son's son, and so on. Then all of that falls apart, and people are battling for hundreds of years. And then finally we have everybody kind of unified and controlled under one guy, and then, you know, he'll pass that title down for a few generations, right? So this is the Qin Dynasty. And so I think I just kind of gave away the answer to that, which sometimes I do. But yeah, so we have the Warring States period coming to an end as one family or one ruler is able to finally get all these other states under their control and then create a little empire in the Yellow River Valley, right? Maybe the more important thing, though, in this section is the idea of legalism. What is legalism? That's part of it, right? So having one centralized authority is related to legalism. It's a way for them to rule. That could be part of it, right? So we hear about some mass punishment. We hear about a bunch of soldiers being burned alive. Man, it was a violent period, was it not? The ancient world was not was tough. The ancient world was tough. Right. So it has something to do with ruling a central ruler. Say that one more time. Right. So this legalism is kind of a framework by which a ruler can rule a large state efficiently, right? And can maintain control. Because again, this is a tricky thing to do in the ancient world. You've got a lot of people, you've got them all spread out all over the place. Nobody can read and write. You know, you have to find a way to find a way to control and coordinate and get all these people to cooperate, you know, in this ancient world with no communication, and it's difficult, right? And so what's one of the things that Shanyang sort of proposes?
Each ruler control another ruler. Like they all control each other, so
Yeah, so he kind of he suggested that the farmers be divided into these little pods, right? These little groups of 5 families, and they were all kind of responsible to each other. If they did well, they would all be rewarded with a higher rank. If they committed a crime or didn't do well, they would all be punished as a group, right? And so he kind of builds in this system of accountability within smaller families, right? But there's smaller groups of families, which is actually a pretty smart thing, right? Humans respond well to social pressure, and so it's actually a pretty smart idea to put them together and to make them, responsible as a whole rather than.
Also for the army, he said like the one who comes with less casualties and like get raised, he will also get raised.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so they'll be for their farming activities, but also for their activities in battle, right? This is also a period of time where a lot of states don't have a full-time army. Their army is actually made of farmers, and so when it's time to go to war, farmers put down their farming tools and they pick up their sword, right? That's kind of how it works. Sort of actual professional armies tend to come a little bit later in most cases. So they'll be rewarded or punished as a group, and he sort of divides up all the farming communities into groups of 5 families. What else does he propose?
he published penalties for the public so they can each one really good action committed.
Yeah, there's a very clear legal code, right? So it's not the ruler making, random decisions here and there. If you steal from your neighbor, you know what's going to happen to you, right? There's a clear punishment. And what's kind of interesting about these punishments?
You made it public.
They're what?
You made it like you gave it to the public.
Right, so the public knows, right? Everyone knows what happens to you if you steal from your neighbor. But what else is kind of interesting about this law code? It's quite severe, and your whole family might get punished. Yeah, that's brutal and awful. One more thing. Yeah, we got that. It has to do with social stratification. At least I think I read that, didn't I? What's that? Yeah. What was the ranking thing? Oh, okay. No, that's not what I was thinking. Let me just see if I can find it. I'm hoping I didn't imagine it, but I'm.
Also, like the codes on people, no matter their status.
Right. So the laws apply to everybody equally, regardless of whether you are high or low status. That's pretty interesting as well, and not super common for the ancient world, right? Remember the Code of Hammurabi? It depended who you were, right? If you were a free person or a noble, then sometimes you just had to pay a fine if you committed a crime. But if you were a slave, committing the same crime could get, a piece of your body cut off, or you might be killed, right? So here, Shanyang is suggesting a very clear legal code, a pretty brutal legal code, but it applies to everyone equally, right? And everybody knows what happens, right? What's that? Probably not to the king, but everybody else gets punished similarly. What else? What else did Shanyang propose? Or what other changes did they make? Or things that they did, things that the Qin Dynasty did? They what? Right. So the Qin emperors seem to have been very clear about their expectations for people, both with the legal code and in other ways. What else did they do? This is legal code. They divided up families of farmers. They built roads. How many roads? Like how much? Did I read 8,600 kilometers of road? Did I read that? Or am I making that up?
Yeah.
68. Sorry, I got it backward. Still, that's almost 7,000 kilometers of roads 2,500 years ago. Insane, right? This is one of the benefits of living in an empire. Empires usually build roads so that people can travel throughout the empire and trade, right? So this, again, it's a benefit to being in the empire, is that you can make more money because moving around is much more easily. Empires tend to build roads, and the Qin Empire here builds roads. What else do they do? What else do they build? Yeah, they build a northern defensive wall, and as the text mentions, this is pre the Great Wall of China. It's a little earlier than that, but it's meant to sort of keep out all of those barbarians to the north, right? Which is a legitimate concern, because eventually barbarians from the north will come in and conquer China, but that's later. Yeah, the Mongols will show up a little bit later on, but yeah, so the wall is a worthwhile thing. They build a wall, they build roads, they build a big fancy palace for the emperor, which shows how powerful he is. What else do they do? What's that? A Colosseum? Oh, a mausoleum. What's a mausoleum? Do you know what a mausoleum is? It's a tomb, yeah. It's a place where people are buried, either their bodies or their ashes or some such thing. The current, weights and measures and currency are standardized as well. Again, huge benefit to living in an empire, right? Suddenly everyone's using the same money, everyone's using the same weights. Hugely helpful in trying to trade with other people if everybody's trading in the same way, right? So again, when you're part of an empire, sometimes you get conquered, sometimes your leader gets their head cut off or whatever. Sometimes you don't have a lot of say in things, but there are benefits as well, right? There's peace, there's stability, there's currencies and weights and measures and roads, and sometimes protection, because the empire that just conquered you doesn't want somebody else conquering you, so they'll defend you. So again, empires are kind of a double-edged sword. There's benefits to being in them, and then sometimes there's not. Did we miss anything from Shanyang, or did we cover his reforms?
We talk about measures of facility. Next step, you mentioned about the facilities of government, like to make it more stable.
Oh, yeah, where did he say that?
The last
Facilities of governors? Oh,
measures so facilitate communication and
right. Yeah, so kind of what you're seeing, I think, is an attempt at making things uniform, right? Making sure, you have a legal code and it applies to everyone equally, right? We have a system of farming and everyone's in, groups of 5 families. We have a currency, and this is what the currency is, and this is how much it's worth, right? This is how much a pound is. They're not using pounds, of course, or kilograms. This is how much a kilogram is. This is how much a centimeter is, right? And it makes it easier for people to communicate and cooperate and trade if everyone's using kind of these same concepts, right? And again, civilizations and particularly empires are good for doing this. They want to standardize things to make it easier to rule, but it also makes it easier for the people to kind of cooperate and trade and make money. But yeah, there's a real attempt to make things the same, right? To make things uniform. And lasting effects of the Qin Dynasty. Like there's kind of only one that's mentioned, but what do I mean by this question? Yeah, what's kind of a permanent effect of this period? The what?
The stable administrative foundation.
Right. So there's a stable administrative foundation is created. Mulder, what were you going to say? Okay. And Baha, what were you going to say? Yeah. Yeah, and kind of a beginning of an era in which Chinese culture is more uniform and China is kind of ruled by one leader. China is united, or at least, the Yellow River Valley section of China anyway, not the entire thing. But yeah, it's kind of a beginning of a unified, centralized China, one that has a very uniform legal system, one in which these ideas of Taoism and Confucianism already exist. There's a writing system. All of these kind of, again, building blocks of Chinese culture are going to be put into place for centuries after that. Right, which brings us to this, the first emperor of China, the Qin Dynasty. So this is a bit of a historical drama, and it tells the story of the first Qin emperor, who, as we've just read, unifies China and declares himself emperor in 221 BC, so about 2240 years ago or so. As we've just read, he will create a number of sweeping reforms. He will build roads and walls and all kinds of things. And so this video is kind of an attempt to tell that story, but also to kind of show us what it might have been like in China in that period of time. And so this was originally an IMAX film, so it was originally shown on a big giant screen. But interestingly, it was also a Canadian and Chinese co-production. So part of this was filmed by a Canadian company, but I believe filmed in China and with lots of Chinese actors and a lot of attention paid to detail, right? So trying to get it to look like maybe ancient China would have looked like, maybe, right? So again, this is kind of we're watching this to get a little bit of, to show us some of the things we've read about, but also to kind of just get a feeling of what that would have been like, right? To sort of see and hear what it might have been like to live in this period. And so what I want you to pay attention to is this. So in the film, what evidence do we see of some of the things we've already talked about? So subsistence practices, like how do people get their food? Sorry, these notifications are binging like crazy. So subsistence practices, how do people get their food? Governance, authority, and law. So how do we see that? Oh my God, I just gotta turn this down. Governance, authority, and law. So how is the state being governed? How are laws being passed or used? What do people's homes look like in this period? How are people actually living? What kind of technology do we see? And keep in mind, in an anthropological sense, technology is anything that people use for a purpose. Okay, so this is my coffee thing for people online. This is technology, right? Usually we think of technology as like phones and computers and that, but this is technology. My glasses are technology. My toque is technology. My shoes are technology. Anything you see that kind of pops out that's interesting to you in that regard. Spiritual or religious beliefs, do we see any evidence of that in this film? And cultural expressions, do we see any art? Do we see any music? stuff like that, okay? So keep an eye out for these sort of pieces of culture. Yeah, and that brings us to the film. So maybe what we'll do is before we dive in, we'll take a quick 10-minute break. We'll come back, and then I'll show you some of this film, and we'll see what we think of it. Okay. I don't remember. 40 minutes. Is that acceptable? Does that please the king? Okay. Okay, let's take a break, and we'll come back. All right, and we are back. So, movie time. Um, we're gonna watch this. We'll see how it goes. I'm not. I'm not totally convinced on the how great a film this is, but I'd be curious to know. Like, keep an eye out for these things: subsistence practices, governance and law, people's homes, technology, spiritual, religious beliefs, or cultural expressions. Keep an eye out for these sort of things, and then maybe in 25 minutes or so, we'll just kind of evaluate how this movie is going and see if we like it or not. Because I would be curious to know if you think it's kind of worth watching or if you think it's like or whatever. I'd be curious. Okay, so for people who are online, just give me 1 second here. I should have done this on the break, but I was running around doing something else. I'm just going to put this into Microsoft Teams so that you have all these things in front of you. Oh, I already did. Ah, nice work, Mike. So ahead of things. Okay, so this little list of questions or things to look for is in Microsoft Teams, as is the link for the film itself. So let's watch 25 minutes, and then we'll come back here and we'll talk about what we've seen, okay? So again, the link and the questions is in Microsoft Teams. Online people, we'll see you in 25 minutes and we'll watch the same thing in here, okay? Okay, so 25 minutes in to the first emperor of China. What are your thoughts on what you're seeing here? What's that? He's unfair. Well, yeah. I mean, he's he's a ruler who has taken power through violence, and now he is doing whatever he wants, right? So that's, yeah, in some ways that's definitely unfair. It's what? It's pretty much modern day China. How do you think? How do you feel? What's that? Right. The almost the last scene we saw was, the part of ruling a state or an empire is imposing an ideology, right? And in order to impose that ideology, you have to sort of get rid of the other ones, right? And so Qin here burns a bunch of older books that have different ideologies that conflict with his, which again is not an odd thing for a state or an empire to do, to censor certain things. And it's certainly not a strange thing for a new ruler to lock up or murder those kind of smart enough to criticize their policies. And here Qin just buries them alive. So again, it's, brutal, but it's very much from the textbook of taking power, the textbook of taking power, right? You impose your own ideology, you erase the ideologies that conflict with yours, you get rid of any people who would challenge you, either militarily or sort of intelligence-wise. Yeah, so what you see here is, there's a comparison to maybe to modern China, but also to other states that have been around as well, particularly when you have a dictator taking power. They'll basically do exactly what Qin has done here. So he's, reading from the same textbook, if you will. What else? What else is happening? Sorry, Mulder and then Basil. The agriculture thing? Yeah, we see people farming, right? We see people tending their crops, and we see a small farming family, right? We saw a farming family who the young man was going to go off to fight the war, right? And we kind of saw what was their house like? Yeah, it just looked like a little clay hut, right, with a little fence around it, maybe to keep the animals out and to keep the cow in, and that's about it, right? That's how most people are living, in contrast to our friend Qin here, who has, ultimate luxury. What's that? Yeah. Huge building, huge house, carpets, fancy food and drink, people to do everything for him. What else did we see? Basil, sorry, what was your comment? Yeah, they were divided up into a bunch of little kingdoms, like little states, and then Qin sort of went around and managed to conquer them all and bring them under his control. That we saw. What else did we see? Pretty cruel punishment, right? So the prime minister had attempted to overthrow Qin, but that little plot did not go very well for him, and so he had to drink poison, and then his associate was separated. Yeah. Oof. Yeah. Brutal, right? It's a brutal time. Jails are expensive, right? So nobody gets sent to jail in this period. They get punished other ways. What else did we see? The modern technique of burning land?
No, the burned land.
Oh yeah.
I destroy everything, but it's not different.
Oh right. Yeah. So in some cases that's probably what gets done, right? Is that some things, in order to establish the new order, some elements of the old order must be destroyed, right? What else do we see? Yeah, pretty much, right? I mean, as I say, jails are expensive, and so if you don't want to pay for jails, and people have no money to pay fines, there's not really a lot of punishments you can do, right? You can charge them money, or you can, exact some form of violence on them, cutting off pieces of them, or just outright killing them, right? There's just not a lot. Some people can get sold into slavery too. I'm not sure about ancient China, but in other places in the world, you can be made a slave as a punishment, I guess. What else do we see? Yeah, so the army is an important part of how Qin comes to power, right? So they're rewarded for their bravery and for their military exploits, right? What else do we see?
Each empire is divided into colors.
Into others?
No, they're divided into colors.
Colors. Oh yeah. Yeah, I guess each kingdom will have its own colors, its own symbols, its own
Kingdom or
kingdoms to begin with, and then Qin establishes an empire. What color do we see a lot of?
red, blue, white.
Yeah. A lot. I was noticing a lot of red. Were you? Yeah, I was kind of thinking that too, because red is kind of a very culturally significant color for China, and so I'm not sure if there's a connection there, but I was noticing a lot of red. What about music and dance?
Girls,
Yeah, the girls had that little sort of dance routine that they did, and then there was some music that accompanied it, right? And so we saw some of those stringed instruments. I don't know what that big string instrument is called. Does anyone know? It looks like it's got about 50 strings, and the guy's kind of plucking it, and no, I think it's still in use, whatever it's called. What's that? No. But it had it had kind of a bridge like a cello, right? So the strings were going over that sort of central bridge piece. But that, and we saw the bells, just like we saw in the Confucius documentary. They have a bunch of bronze bells. What else? Oh yeah, we see 12 statues of Qin, and they are somewhat stylized, right? They don't look perfectly accurate to life. They look kind of square and smoothed over in a way.
when we're like practicing the Red Army, I saw like white like
Right. So the army, we saw the army going through some of their drills, some of their maneuvers, right? Trying to practice their battle skills. And we saw the tents that they probably live in when they're out on campaign, right? Saw that?
Also for the dance, nobody enjoyed it except for the
Yeah, there was kind of.
everyone was eating.
Yeah, there was very. I guess there's very strict rules of decorum, right, in the emperor's palace, right? So the girls were dancing, but everyone was, not cheering the girls on or clapping or anything like that. It was very kind of subdued, right? Because the girls aren't really dancing for everybody; they're dancing for Qin, right? And so he's kind of the one who's allowed to enjoy it, and everyone else has to kind of keep a lid on it, right? They have to be very respectful, and that seemed to be kind of the tone in that palace anyway, right? It was very kind of quiet, it was very respectful, everybody moved slowly, Qin spoke, but everyone else was very careful about what they said. He is yes, he is, and a brutal one at that. At least it seems so. I wouldn't want to get on his bad side.
Also, nobody can go on that stage where they can rest and have permission.
Yeah, the dais, right? That raised area where he sits. Yeah, no one is allowed to go on there. Even when somebody is trying to assassinate him, everyone is like, "Oh no, we can't go on. Can't go on the dais," right? Turns out Qin could handle himself, but yeah, we saw that. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, we saw some crossbow weapons, right? We saw crossbows, we saw swords, we saw helmets and breastplates made out of different configurations, horses, carts, interesting looking shoes with the wooden platform with the two bars. I don't know how comfortable those could have been, but you know, fashion, right? They're probably more comfortable than high heels today, so. What else did we see? Lots of bowls and cups, a very fancy box with some guy's head in it. Yeah, the head of a trader. Qin seemed to be pretty happy with it. I don't know if I'd want a head for a gift, but there you go. Yeah, lots of stuff. So we're kind of out of time here, but let's watch the end of it tomorrow because there's only 10 minutes left anyway. It's not quite as long as I thought. But what did you think? Is it okay? Is it? I know it's not kind of the CGI heavy movies that we're kind of used to at the moment, but yeah, it's from 1990, and so it's 30 years old. I think they spent a lot of money on it, to be honest. I think it was not cheap to put this movie on. But what? Yeah, but and that's the other thing too, is that I think, you know, like not real filmmakers, but Hollywood filmmakers, they tend to like make stuff sexy. There's like, oh, what will look really good on screen, what will be really cool, whereas here I think they're trying to say what would be historically accurate, what would it really look like. And so I think that's kind of the reason why it looks the way it does, is because they're trying to show you what it would have been like, not the coolest version of what, you know, we could imagine ancient China to be. So it looks it looks the way it does for that reason too, I think. But, okay, anyway, that is all the time we have. Pack it up. I will see you tomorrow. We'll watch the end of this, and then I think we'll kind of wrap up China and transition into Greece. Greece.